1 year after the Battle of Kepler Station, Fleet Admiral Gary Mitchell stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers. The great hall that had once been filled with proud alien representatives now looked very different. Human officers sat at tables that had been empty for months. The war was not over, but everything had changed. Admiral Mitchell looked around the room at the representatives of the surviving alien races. The Varex had sent their remaining ship commanders, the Thakmor, had a few honor guards who had survived the early battles. The Zeftai had rebuilt some of their AI-controlled fleets. All of them were listening to human military advisors. The Kethvar threat has been contained in the Outer Rim systems, Admiral Mitchell reported to the Assembly. They have not advanced toward the galactic core in 8 months. Their expansion has stopped. This was news that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The unstoppable alien swarm had been stopped by the species everyone had considered primitive. Captain Susan Davis stood up to give her report. She now commanded mixed crews that included humans and aliens working together. These integrated teams were proving to be remarkably effective. The key breakthrough came when we stopped trying to outthink the enemy, Susan explained. Instead, we learned to think so randomly that they could not predict our actions. A Vrex commander raised his hand. His name was Logic Prime 7, and he had survived the destruction of the great Vrex fleet by learning to think more like humans. Captain Davis, our computer analysis indicates that human tactical decisions are correct only 63% of the time. How does this lead to victory? Susan smiled. This was exactly the kind of question that showed why humans were winning. Logic Prime 7, you are thinking about it wrong. We do not need to make the right decision every time. We just need to make decisions the enemy cannot predict. She pulled up a battle report on the main display. Look at this engagement from last month. Commander Tony Rodriguez attacked a Kethvar supply convoy using a cargo ship loaded with party decorations and birthday cake mix. The alien representatives looked confused. Even the humans in the room were not sure they understood. The decorations were actually chaff dispensers that confused Kethvar sensors, Susan continued. The cake mix was a chemical compound that jammed their biological systems when it got into their air vents. Rodriguez won the battle using party supplies. Logic. Prime 7's mechanical voice sounded puzzled. But how did Commander Rodriguez know that party supplies would be effective? Weapons? He did not know, Susan admitted. He was delivering birthday party supplies to a colony when the Kethvar attacked. He used what he had available and improvised weapons from his cargo. This was the essence of human warfare that the aliens were still learning to understand. Humans did not just adapt to situations. They created new solutions from whatever materials they had on hand. Engineer Rachel Scott had been working on hybrid technologies that combined human improvisation with alien precision. Her workshop on Earth had become a center for developing new kinds of weapons and defense systems. We have learned something important about technology, Rachel explained to a gathering of galactic scientists. The most advanced systems are not always the most effective systems. She showed them a weapon that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. This is what we call a human special. It combines Vrex targeting computers with Thakmor energy weapons and human backup systems that nobody understands. A Zeftai AI specialist transmitted a question through its mechanical voice box. Engineer Scott, our analysis indicates that 37% of your hybrid systems should not function according to known physics principles. Why do they work? Rachel laughed. Because sometimes the laws of physics are more like suggestions. When you combine different technologies in ways their creators never intended, you get results that nobody expected. This approach was revolutionizing galactic technology. Human engineers were taking alien systems and modifying them in ways that seemed impossible but somehow worked. The results were weapons and ships that neither species could have created alone. Meanwhile, the Kethvar were facing a completely new kind of problem. Dr. Katie Morgan had been monitoring their communications for months. and what she discovered was remarkable. "The HFY collective consciousness is changing," Katie reported to the Galactic Council. "They are developing something they never had before, individual personalities." This news shocked everyone in the room. The HFY had always been a single collective mind controlling millions of bodies. The idea of individual HFY was like imagining individual cells in a human body suddenly deciding to think for themselves. "How is this possible?" asked a Thakmor honor guard. Katie pulled up recordings of HFY communications. When they encountered human unpredictability, their collective mind started trying to develop creative thinking. But creativity requires individual perspective. You cannot be truly creative if you think exactly like everyone else. The result was that some HFY ships were starting to act independently. They made decisions that did not match the collective strategy. Some had even been observed helping human refugees escape from captured worlds. Admiral Mitchell saw the bigger picture immediately. "The war is changing them just as much as it changed us." This was true in ways that were both hopeful and concerning. The HFY were becoming less predictable, but they were also becoming less unified. Some HFY groups were starting to fight each other instead of focusing on galactic conquest. Captain Ryan Phillips, now commanding a full battle group, had encountered these rogue HFY several times. "Some of them are trying to communicate with us," he reported. "They want to learn about human concepts like individual choice and creative thinking." This created a new challenge. How do you make peace with an enemy that is becoming more like you, while still fighting the parts of that enemy that want to destroy you? General William Hayes, now the Supreme Commander of Human Forces, had been thinking about this problem for weeks. "We need to remember that the goal was never to destroy the HFY. The goal was to stop their expansion and protect inhabited worlds." He had been in contact with some of the individual HFY who had broken away from the collective. These conversations were strange and difficult, but they offered hope for a future where humans and HFY might coexist. "They are learning to think like individuals," General Hayes explained to his staff. "But they are still learning what individual choice means. Some choose to keep fighting, others choose to explore. A few have chosen to try farming." The idea of HFY farmers was so strange that it took time for humans to accept it. But on 3 different worlds, former HFY warriors were learning to grow crops instead of consuming organic matter for their ships. Dr. Kevin Wright had been studying these peaceful HFY. "They are developing emotions," he reported. "Curiosity, satisfaction, even something that looks like happiness. The collective mind suppressed these feelings, but individual minds seemed to naturally develop them." As the war entered its second year, the galaxy was becoming a more complex place. The clear lines between human and alien, friend and enemy, were blurring in ways no one had expected. Admiral Mitchell concluded his report to the Galactic Council with thoughts about the future. "We have learned that the universe is not as predictable as we thought. The most logical species in the galaxy were defeated by chaos. The most adaptable collective mind was changed by contact with individual creativity." He looked around the room at representatives of different species who were learning to work together in new ways. "Humans have taken our place as a major galactic power, but we have not done it by conquering other species. We have done it by teaching them to think differently." The war everyone feared had not ended with the victory of one species over another. Instead, it had created something new. A galaxy where different types of intelligence could work together, where chaos and order could balance each other, where individual creativity could solve problems that pure logic could not handle. The HFY. Threat still existed in some parts of the galaxy, but it was no longer unstoppable. The collective mind that had seemed impossible to defeat was being changed by contact with human unpredictability. As Admiral Mitchell finished his speech, he thought about how far they had all come. A year ago, humans had been the weakest species in the galaxy. Now they were teachers, showing other species that sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem was the one nobody thought to try. The galaxy had learned that chaos, properly directed, could be the most powerful force in the universe. And humans had learned that their greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers, but their refusal to accept that any problem had only one solution. The war everyone feared had become the peace nobody expected. But it was a peace, built on understanding that differences in thinking could be strengths rather than weaknesses, and that sometimes the most important victory was not defeating your enemy, but helping them become something better than they were before. Jake Morrison crouched behind the broken wall of what used to be a shopping mall. The concrete was cold against his back. 200 years ago, this place was full of people buying things, laughing, living their lives. Now it was just another ruin in the dead city that used to be Denver. He looked at his watch. Lisa would be here soon with the intel they needed. The Caltherian patrol had passed through 20 minutes ago, their silver ships floating silently above the empty streets. Jake hated those ships. He hated how quiet they were, how they moved like ghosts through the sky. The Caltherians had taken over Earth when Jake's great-great-grandfather was still a boy. They didn't come with guns blazing or drop bombs from space. They came with smiles and promises. They said humans were too violent, too chaotic. They said they wanted to help humanity grow up, become better. What a load of garbage that turned out to be. Jake heard footsteps in the rubble. He turned, hand moving to his weapon, then relaxed when he saw Lisa Grant picking her way carefully through the debris. She was small and thin, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. In her hand was a data pad that glowed, softly in the dim light. "You're late," Jake said, standing up. "Had to take the long way. 3 patrols between here and the server farm," Lisa replied. She handed him the data pad. "But I got what we needed." Jake looked at the screen. Lines of text scrolled past, most of it in the alien language the Caltherians used for their official communications. But Lisa had already run it through their translation program. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Approaching shadow?" Jake read aloud. "Final preparations? What does this mean?" Lisa shook her head. "I don't know. But look at this part." She pointed to another section of text. "They're moving all their research to the main facility. All of it. The brain chip projects, the human studies, everything." Jake felt a chill. That had nothing to do with the cold air. The brain chips were the worst part of the Caltherian occupation. Small devices they put in people's heads that made them obey without question. 90% of humans had them now. The lucky ones didn't even remember what it felt like to think for themselves anymore. "There's more?" Lisa said. Her voice was quiet, almost whispered. "They're talking about harvesting. Jake, I think they've been studying us for something big." Before Jake could respond, they heard the sound of boots on concrete, multiple sets moving fast. Jake grabbed Lisa's arm and pulled her down behind the wall. Through a gap in the rubble, he could see them coming. 6 figures in black armor, moving with the precise steps of people who weren't quite people anymore. The Enforcement Corps. Humans who had volunteered to serve their alien masters in exchange for enhanced bodies and expanded lifespans. They were faster and stronger than normal humans, and they had no mercy left in them. The brain chips had seen to that. "We need to move," Jake whispered. "Now!" They crawled through the ruins, staying low and quiet. Behind them, the enforcement. Soldiers were spreading out, searching. Jake knew they would find the hiding spot soon. These weren't regular patrols. Someone had told them exactly where to look. Lisa touched his shoulder and pointed to a hole in the floor where the old mall's fountain used to be. They had used it as an escape route before. Jake nodded, and they dropped down into the tunnels that ran under the city. The underground was where the free humans lived now. Miles of old subway tunnels, utility pipes, and storm drains that the Caltherians didn't bother to map completely. It was cold and dark, and smelled like rust and old. water, but it was theirs. They ran through the tunnels for 10 minutes before they reached the safe house. It was an old subway station that had been abandoned even before the invasion. Carlos Rivera was waiting for them, cleaning his rifle with the patience of an old soldier. He looked up when they came in, his scarred face serious. "Trouble?" Carlos asked. "Always," Jake replied. "But we got the data." Helen Knox emerged from the shadows where she had been working at a computer terminal. She was older than the rest of them, maybe 50, with gray hair and the kind of calm that came from years of dealing with politicians and diplomats. Before the invasion, she had been someone important in the government. Now she was just another. "Rebel, what did you find?" Helen asked. Lisa connected her datapad to their main computer. The stolen information appeared on the screen, translated into simple English. As they read, the room grew quiet. "They're afraid of something," Helen said finally. "Look at these resource allocations. They're pulling back defensive positions, consolidating their forces." "Afraid of what?" Carlos asked. "They've got the most advanced technology in the galaxy." "I don't know," Jake said. "But whatever it is, they think we're part of the solution." Lisa pointed to another section of the data. "See this? Neural pattern harvesting has increased by 300% in the last month. They're not just controlling people anymore. They're studying how human brains work." Jake felt sick. He thought about his sister Emma, living in the controlled city zones with a chip in her head. She looked happy when he saw her last, but it wasn't real happiness. It was the artificial calm that the chips produced. She didn't even recognize him anymore. "There's something else," Lisa continued. "I found references to other species. Dozens of them, all extinct now. But the Caltharians have been studying their neural patterns too." "Extinct how?" Carlos asked. "I don't know. The files are classified above my access level. But Jake, I think the Caltharians aren't the top of the food chain. I think they're running from something." Helen was quiet for a long moment, staring at the data. "If that's true, then everything we thought we knew about the invasion is wrong." "Wrong how?" Jake asked. "What if they didn't conquer us to rule us?" Helen said slowly. "What if they conquered us to save us?" Carlos snorted. "Save us? They put mind control chips in our heads." "To study us," Helen replied. "Think about it. Why would an advanced alien race need to understand how human brains work unless they needed something from us?" Jake looked at the data again. Lines of numbers and technical terms that meant humans were being used for some purpose they didn't understand. He thought about the millions of people in the controlled zones, going through their daily routines without knowing why they were really there. "We need to know more," he said finally. "Lisa, can you get deeper into their systems?" "Maybe, but I'll need to get close to one of their main facilities, the kind of place that's heavily guarded. The research center outside Colorado Springs," Carlos suggested. "I've been watching it. Lots of activity lately, but the security patterns are predictable." "That's a suicide mission," Helen said. "Maybe," Jake replied. "But if we're right about this, if the Caltharians are preparing for something bigger, we need to know what it is." Lisa was already working on her computer, pulling up maps and security layouts. "I can get in," she said, "but I'll need backup. And if I'm caught, I'm dead." "We're all dead if we don't figure this out," Jake said. He looked around at his team, at the people who had become his family in this underground war. "The Caltharians have been planning something for 200 years. Whatever it is, it's starting now." Outside, in the tunnels that connected their hideout to the surface, they could hear the sound of more patrols moving through the ruins above. The Enforcement Corps was expanding their search. Soon, even the underground wouldn't be safe. Jake made his decision. "We go tomorrow night. Carlos, start planning the route. Helen, see what you can find in the old government databases about Caltharian activities before the invasion. Lisa, get ready to crack the hardest security system you've ever seen. And if we don't make it back," Carlos asked. Jake looked at the data one more time, at the evidence that humanity was being prepared for something none of them understood. Then at least we'll die knowing the truth. The lights flickered in their underground hideout as another patrol passed overhead. In the distance, they could hear the hum of Caltherian ships maintaining their endless watch over the conquered world. But for the first time in years, Jake felt something like hope. They were close to answers, close to understanding why humanity had really been chained. Tomorrow night, they would find out what the Caltherians were so afraid of. And maybe, just maybe, they would discover that the key to freedom had been inside humanity all along. Chained humanity are the same ones we need to save it. Outside in the Denver Civic Center had not seen this much activity in 200 years. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of what used to be the main plaza, watching Caltherian ships land, with perfect silence. Their silver hulls reflected the morning sun, but somehow they seemed to absorb light rather than shine with it. "I count 12 ships," Carlos said through the radio in Jake's ear. "That's more than they said would come." Jake touched the device Dr. Moore had given him. The enhanced neural shield felt heavy against his chest, but he hoped it would work if this meeting went bad. Around him, other resistance leaders were arriving. Some he recognized from years of underground communication. Others were strangers who had crawled out of hiding for this moment. Jake. Steve Parker appeared at his side, wearing the closest thing to a military uniform he could find. "You ready for this?" "No," Jake replied honestly. "But I don't think anyone could be." The Caltherian ships opened without sound. Ramps extended to the ground, and figures began walking down them. Jake had seen Caltherians before, but only at a distance, or in security footage. Up close, they were both more and less alien than he had expected. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that looked like it had been carved from white stone. Their faces were angular, with large eyes that shifted color depending on how the light hit them. They wore robes that seemed to move on their own, as if they were alive. At the front of the group was someone who had to be Overseer Vex Thalin. He was older than the others, with markings on his face that looked like scars. When he walked, the other Caltherians followed exactly 3 steps behind. "Commander Morrison," Vex Thalin said, and his voice was the same musical tone they had heard over the radio. "Thank you for coming." Jake looked around at the other humans. There were maybe 50 of them, leaders from every major resistance cell on the planet. They all looked like they wanted to run or fight. None of them looked like they wanted to talk. "Before we begin," Jake said, "I want to know why you chose to meet here." Vex Thalin tilted his head. "This was your species' civic center, a place where your people came to participate in government. We thought it appropriate for a discussion between equals." "Equals?" A woman named Sandra Walsh stepped forward. She led the resistance cell in what used to be New York. "You put brain, chips in our heads and called us equals?" "We made a terrible choice," Vex Thalin replied. "We chose survival over freedom, for our species and for yours." Another Caltherian stepped forward. This one was younger, with fewer markings on his face. "I am Commander Zethkalar. I have spent my life studying your species. What we did to you was wrong, but it was necessary." "Necessary for what?" Steve Parker demanded. Instead of answering, Zethkalar gestured to the air above them. A holographic display appeared, showing the galaxy from above. Dots of light marked inhabited worlds. As they watched, the dots began going out one by one. "This is what the Devourers do," Zethkalar explained. "They move from system to system, consuming every form of conscious life. 47 worlds in this sector alone have gone dark in the past century." The hologram zoomed in on Earth's solar system. Jake could see ships moving between the outer planets, but they looked wrong somehow. They seemed to bend space around them, making it hard to focus on their exact shape. "They will arrive in 2 months," Vex Thalin said. Our defensive fleet will delay them for perhaps a week. Then they will begin the conversion process. What exactly is conversion? Helen Knox asked. She had been quiet during the walk here, but now she sounded like the diplomat she used to be. The Devourers are not alive as you understand life, another Caltharian explained. This one wore different robes, marked with symbols that looked like scientific equations. They are collective consciousness made from the minds they have consumed. When they attack a world, they extend this consciousness into every thinking being on the planet. Lisa stepped forward. Like the brain chips, but worse. Much worse, the scientist replied. The brain chips suppress your natural thoughts, but leave you alive inside. Devourer conversion removes your consciousness entirely and replaces it with their own. You become part of their collective mind, experiencing everything they have experienced, feeling the hunger of 1,000,000 consumed worlds. Jake felt sick. And you think we can fight something like that? Not fight, Vexthalan said. Resist. In all our research, we have found only one species with natural immunity to devourer conversion. Humans. Why us? Sandra Walsh asked. Zeth Kalar manipulated the hologram, showing brain scans from different species. Most intelligent life develops in predictable patterns. Logic, order, efficiency. But humans are different. Your thoughts are chaotic, emotional, irrational. The Devourers cannot consume what they cannot understand. Carlos laughed bitterly. So, our biggest weakness is our greatest strength? Yes, Vexthalan said simply. But there is a problem. The brain chips that protect you from conversion also suppress the very traits that make you immune. We had to choose between keeping you safe in the short term or keeping you free for the long term. Dr. Maya Chen had been silent through most of the conversation, but now she spoke up. The research I saw showed you were trying to replicate human neural patterns in other species. Did it work? The Caltharian scientist looked uncomfortable. Partially. We have managed to create artificial resistance in some volunteers from our species. But it is not perfect, and the process is often fatal. How many of your people volunteered for this process? Helen asked. All of them, Vexthalan replied quietly. Our entire species has undergone neural modification to resist the Devourers. We are no longer fully Caltharian. We are something new, something desperate. Jake was beginning to understand. You changed yourselves to fight these things, and it still wasn't enough. No. We can resist conversion for a time, but not indefinitely. And we cannot replicate the chaotic creativity that makes humans naturally immune. Zeth Kalar looked around at the assembled humans. That is why we need your help. What kind of help? Steve asked. We need human volunteers to serve as neural anchors, the scientist explained. Individuals who can project their natural resistance to others through direct mental contact. If we can create a network of human anchors throughout the population, we might be able to protect entire cities from conversion. And what happens to these volunteers? Sandra asked. The scientist was quiet for a moment. The process is extremely dangerous. Most volunteers do not survive. Those who do are changed permanently. They become living conduits for human consciousness, able to share their thoughts and emotions with anyone they touch. Jake looked around at his fellow humans. Some looked interested, others horrified. All of them looked like they were trying to make an impossible decision. There's something else, Dr. Maya Chen said. The children. In my research, I noticed that human children show stronger resistance than adults. Why is that? Human neural patterns are evolving, Zeth Kalar replied. Each generation shows greater natural immunity to psychic influence. Your children may be naturally immune to conversion without any artificial enhancement. Maybe? Carlos asked. We do not know for certain. The Devourers have never encountered a species like humanity before. It is possible that human children could resist them completely. It is also possible that they will be the first targets, specifically because they represent evolution toward greater resistance. Jake felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. What are you asking us to do? Work with us, Vexthalan said. Combine our technology with your natural abilities. Help us create defenses that neither of our species could build. Alone. And if we refuse? Helen asked. Then we will fight the Devourers alone and lose. Your species will be converted, and in time, you will be used to convert other worlds. The chaos that makes you immune will be turned into a weapon against the rest of the galaxy. Lisa was monitoring her equipment. Jake, I'm getting readings from the outer system. Whatever's out there, it's getting closer. The hologram above them shifted, showing real-time data from the approaching ships. Even at this distance, Jake could feel something wrong about them. They seemed to drain color from the space around them, leaving empty patches in the starfield. How long do we have to decide? Steve asked. The conversion process begins the moment they enter Earth's atmosphere, the scientist replied. If you are going to help us, we need to start preparing immediately. Jake looked at the faces around him. These were people who had spent their lives fighting the Caltharians, and now they were being asked to work with them. It went against everything they had believed, everything they had fought for. But the alternative was becoming part of something that had consumed 47 worlds. I need to talk to my people, Jake said finally. Of course. But remember, Commander Morrison, time is not on our side. The Devourers do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They simply consume and move on to the next world. As the meeting broke up, Jake found himself walking beside Zeth Kalar. The Caltharian commander moved with the grace of someone who had spent his life in military service. Can I ask you something? Jake said. Yes. When your people first came to Earth, were you afraid? Zeth Kalar stopped walking. For a moment, his large eyes shifted to a deeper blue color. Terrified? The sky above Colorado Springs was wrong. Jake Morrison could see it even through the thick concrete walls of the underground command center. The Devourer ships had arrived 3 days ago, and their presence was like a wound in space itself. Colors looked faded, sounds seemed muffled, and everyone moved a little slower than they should. Neural Dampener Array 7 is online, Lisa Grant reported from her position at the main console. She looked exhausted. They all did. For 2 months, they had worked around the clock to prepare Earth's defenses, combining human desperation with Caltharian technology. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the planet's surface. Red dots marked Devourer landing sites across 6 continents. Green dots showed human Caltharian defensive positions. There were far more red dots than green ones. What's the status on the civilian evacuation? He asked. Steve Parker answered from across the room. 80% of the unmodified population has been moved to shielded areas. But Jake, the shields are failing faster than we expected. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. The neural shields were supposed to protect people from devourer conversion by creating fields of chaotic human thoughts. But powering them required volunteers to connect their minds directly to the amplifiers. Most of them died within hours. How many volunteers do we have left? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Dr. Maya Chen looked up from her medical station. 43. But Jake, they're all showing signs of neural strain. We're asking too much of them. Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Commander Zeth Kalar rushed over from the Caltharian equipment section, his face grim. Devourer bioships are descending over Denver, Zeth Kalar reported. The conversion field is expanding faster than our models predicted. Jake ran to the main viewer and felt his heart sink. The city where he had grown up was covered in a gray fog that seemed to move with purpose. Through the fog, he could see shapes that had once been people walking in perfect formation toward the Devourer ships. They're not even fighting. Carlos, Rivera said from beside him. They're just walking into those things. Because they can't fight, Dr. Maya Chen replied. The conversion field removes their ability to think independently. They want to join the collective consciousness. Helen Knox was monitoring communications from around the world. We're getting similar reports from every major city. London, Tokyo, Sydney, New York. The pattern is the same everywhere. Jake watched the tactical display as more and more green dots turned red. Defensive positions were falling not because they were being destroyed, but because their personnel were being converted. People would simply walk away from their posts and join the advancing devourer forces. The neural anchors aren't working, he said. They're working, Zethkalar corrected. But not well enough. We need stronger sources of human chaos, more unpredictable patterns of thought. Lisa looked up from her console. Jake, I'm getting a transmission from one of the evacuation centers. It's Amy Foster. Jake grabbed the radio. Amy, what's your status? Amy Foster's voice crackled through the speakers. Jake, we've got a problem. The shielded areas are being infiltrated, not by devourer ships, but by converted humans. They're our own people, and they're trying to bring down the shields from inside. How many? Steve asked. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're not attacking us directly. They're just standing near the shield generators and somehow disrupting them with their presence. Dr. Maya Chen ran over to Jake. That makes sense. If the devourers have converted enough humans, they can use human neural patterns against our defenses. Jake felt the walls closing in around them. Every defensive plan they had made assumed that humans would remain human. But the devourers were turning humanity's greatest strength into their weakness. What about the children? He asked. The evacuation centers with children. Are they holding up better? Actually, yes, Amy replied. The kid zones are still secure. Whatever's protecting them is working. Zethkalar and Dr. Maya Chen looked at each other. The children, Zethkalar said. Their natural immunity is stronger than we thought. Strong enough to anchor the entire defense network? Jake asked. Maybe. But Jake, we would be asking children to do what's killing our adult volunteers. Jake looked around the command center, at the faces of people he had come to trust with his life. Humans and Caltharians working side by side, trying to save both their species from something worse than extinction. There might be another way, Dr. Maya Chen said slowly. What if we don't try to protect everyone? What if we focus all our resources on creating one massive field of human chaos? Explain, Steve said. Instead of spreading our neural anchors across the planet, we concentrate them in one location. Create a field so intensely human, so chaotic, and unpredictable that it becomes toxic to the devourer collective consciousness. Lisa was already running calculations on her computer. It could work, but the power requirements would be enormous. We'd need hundreds of volunteers, and they'd all have to be linked together in one neural network. A network that would probably kill everyone connected to it, Helen pointed out. Not necessarily, Zethkalar said. If we could stabilize the network using Caltharian neural modification technology, we might be able to create a sustainable field. Jake was thinking fast. Where would we put something like this? It would have to be somewhere the devourers couldn't avoid. Here, Steve said, pointing to a location on the tactical map. NORAD, the old military complex built into Cheyenne Mountain. It's already shielded and it's in a central location. That's 50 miles from here, Carlos pointed out. Then we better start moving, Jake replied. Lisa, how long to pack up the essential equipment? 2 hours, maybe 3? You've got 1 hour. Jake turned to address the entire command center. Everyone listen up. We're abandoning the distributed defense plan. We're going to make one last stand at Cheyenne Mountain. Dr. Maya Chen grabbed his arm. Jake, this is essentially a suicide mission. Even if the neural network works, the people powering it probably won't survive. I know. Jake looked at the tactical display one more time. More than half the planet was showing red now. But if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. The next hour was controlled chaos, Equipment was packed, data was transferred, and vehicles were loaded for the journey to Cheyenne Mountain. The Caltherian ships would carry the most sensitive equipment, while human vehicles transported personnel and supplies. As they prepared to leave, Jake found himself standing beside one of the neural amplifier stations. A young woman named Beth was connected to the system, her eyes closed in concentration as she projected her thoughts into the defensive field around their position. "How long has she been connected?" Jake asked Dr. Maya Chen. 6 hours. "She's past the safe limit, but she won't disconnect." Jake walked over to Beth and touched her shoulder gently. Her eyes opened, but they were unfocused and bloodshot. "Beth, we need to disconnect you now. We're moving the operation." "I can't," she whispered. "If I stop, the field collapses. People die. People are going to die anyway if we don't get to Cheyenne Mountain." Beth nodded slowly, understanding. "Will the new plan work?" Jake looked around at the organized chaos of the evacuation. Humans and Caltherians working together, trying to save a world that had been conquered by one to protect it from the other. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but it's the best chance we have." Beth smiled weakly. "Then let's go save the world." The convoy that left the Colorado Springs facility looked like something from the end of the world. Human military vehicles, mixed with Caltherian ships, moving through a landscape that was slowly being drained of color and life. Above them, Devourer bioships moved through the sky like living storm clouds. Jake rode in the lead vehicle with Lisa, Carlos, and Helen. Behind them, Steve Parker coordinated the military escort. The Caltherarian ships moved in formation around. The convoy, their weapons ready but largely useless against an enemy that attacked consciousness rather than matter. "Jake," Lisa said, monitoring communications, "I'm getting reports from the other evacuation convoys. They're being attacked by converted humans, thousands of them just walking into traffic and surrounding the vehicles." "Any word from the International Defense Coordination?" Helen asked. "Europe went dark 2 hours ago. Asia is holding on, but barely. We might be the last organized resistance left on the planet." Jake watched the landscape pass by outside his window. In the distance, he could see groups of converted humans walking in perfect formation toward the Devourer landing sites. They looked peaceful, almost happy. That was the most terrifying part. "ETA to Cheyenne Mountain?" he asked. 20 minutes, Carlos replied. "If we don't run into any roadblocks." They ran into roadblocks. The first group of converted humans appeared when they were still 10 miles from the mountain. They simply walked out of the forest and stood in the road, not attacking, not threatening, just standing there with empty smiles on their faces. "Drive through them," Jake ordered. "Jake, they're people," the driver protested. "They're not people anymore," Jake replied grimly. "They're extensions of the Devourer consciousness. Drive through them." The convoy pushed through the crowd of converted humans. They didn't fight back or try to get out of the way. They just stood there and let themselves be knocked down, their empty eyes never losing that peaceful expression. By the time they reached Chi, the neural network inside Cheyenne Mountain was like nothing Jake Morrison had ever experienced. 300 human minds connected, as one, their thoughts flowing together in a river of pure consciousness. He could feel every volunteer in the network, their fears and hopes and dreams mixing with his own. "Field strength at maximum," Dr. Maya Chen reported, though her voice seemed to come from very far away. "Jake, the Devourer ships have stopped advancing. Whatever we're doing, it's working." Jake opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display. The gray fog that had been consuming the world was pulling back from Cheyenne Mountain like water running away from hot oil. For the first time in days, he saw clear sky above them. "How long can we maintain this?" he asked, though speaking felt strange when his thoughts were connected to hundreds of other people. "Unknown," Zeth Kalar replied. The Caltherian commander was not connected to the human network, but he was monitoring its effects. The power. Consumption is enormous, but more importantly, the human volunteers are experiencing neural stress beyond anything we have seen. Jake could feel what Zethkalar meant. The network was burning through human consciousness like fuel, consuming memories and emotions to power the field that held the devourers at bay. Some of the volunteers were already losing pieces of themselves, their personalities fragmenting. Under the strain. "We need to end this quickly," Helen Knox said. She was one of the volunteer anchors, her diplomatic mind helping to organize the chaotic thoughts of the network into something resembling order. "Before we lose ourselves completely, Lisa." Grant was still at her computer station, though her hands shook as she typed. "Jake, I'm getting readings from the Devourer ships. They're not just stopped, they're retreating. Something about our field is actually hurting them." "Because we're giving them indigestion," said a voice Jake didn't recognize. He looked around and realized it came from the network itself, from one of the child volunteers whose natural immunity was stronger than any adults. The voice continued, young and clear despite coming from hundreds of minds at once. "The Devourers eat orderly thoughts, predictable patterns, but human thoughts are messy and contradictory. When they try to consume our network, they're consuming chaos itself." Dr. Maya Chen looked up from her medical monitors, her eyes wide. "The children are right. The Devourer's collective consciousness is designed to absorb and organize the thoughts of other species. But human thoughts don't organize easily. We're like poison to them." Jake felt a surge of hope through the network, followed immediately by determination from every connected mind. They had found the weapon that could defeat the Devourers, but using it was destroying the very people who wielded it. "There has to be another way," Jake said. "Some way to weaponize human consciousness without burning it out." Zethkalar was studying readings from his equipment. "Perhaps there is. Commander Morrison, what if instead of creating a defensive field, we created an offensive one?" "What do you mean?" "The Devourer collective consciousness exists partially in psychic space. If we could project human chaos directly into that space, we might be able to disrupt their entire network." Helen's voice came through the neural link, strained but determined. "Like a virus in a computer system, human unpredictability spreading through their organized collective." "But how do we deliver it?" Steve Parker asked. He was leading the military defense of the mountain, but Jake could hear him through the communication systems. Lisa looked up from her console. "The Devourer command ship. It's the central node of their network. If we could get close enough to project human consciousness directly into it." Jake felt the network's attention focus on the idea. Hundreds of minds considering the same problem from different angles, coming up with solutions that no single person could have imagined. "It would be a suicide mission," Carlos Rivera said over the radio. He was leading a patrol outside the mountain, keeping watch for converted humans. "And even if someone could get close to the command ship, how would they project human consciousness into it?" The answer came from the network itself, a collective realization that made Jake's heart sink. "One of us would have to disconnect from the network and carry it manually, upload human chaos directly into the Devourer system." "Who?" Dr. Maya Chen asked, though Jake suspected they all knew the answer. Jake looked around the control room at the people who had become his family during this impossible war. Lisa, exhausted but still working at her computers. Helen, burning herself out to keep the network stable. Dr. Maya Chen, monitoring the health of volunteers who were sacrificing their minds to save their species. "I'll go," Jake said. "No." The response came from the entire network at once, 300 voices speaking as one. "You're needed here to coordinate the network." "Then who?" The answer surprised him. "All of us." Lisa stood up from her computer station, her face pale but determined. "Jake, what if we don't send one person? What if we send the entire network?" "I don't understand." Dr. Maya Chen was already running calculations. She's right. Instead of projecting the field defensively, we could compress it into a single transmission and broadcast it directly into the Devourer command ship. That would overload every volunteer in the network, Zethkalar warned. The neural strain would be fatal. Not necessarily, said the young voice from the children's section of the network. The kids could survive it. Our immunity is stronger. Jake felt the adults in the network recoil from the idea. They had already asked children to risk their lives. Now they were being asked to watch the adults die to save them. There has to be another way, Jake insisted. There is, Helen said through the network. Her mental voice was calm, like she was discussing a business proposal instead of mass suicide. Some of us disconnect before the transmission, the essential personnel, the ones needed to rebuild afterward. I won't ask people to die for me, Jake said. You're not asking, Steve Parker's voice came over the radio. We're volunteering. One by one, the volunteers in the network began speaking, not with their voices, but with their minds, their thoughts, flowing directly into Jake's consciousness. A former teacher who had lost her students to conversion, I want those children to have a future. A mechanic who had spent 2 years hiding underground, I'm tired of running. A grandmother who had volunteered despite having no training. My grandchildren deserve to grow up free. Jake felt tears running down his face as he experienced the determination of ordinary people who had decided to become heroes. They weren't soldiers or resistance fighters. They were just humans who refused to let their species be consumed by something alien and hungry. How long to prepare the transmission? He asked. 2 hours, Lisa replied. Maybe 3. I need to modify the broadcasting equipment to handle that much neural data. Do it. Jake looked around the control room one more time. Anyone who wants to disconnect from the network can do so now. No judgment, no questions asked. Nobody moved. Jake felt the network settle into calm determination. 300 minds focused on a single goal, saving humanity by sacrificing themselves. It was the most human thing he had ever experienced. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of preparation. The neural network was reconfigured from a defensive field into an offensive weapon. Broadcast equipment was modified to transmit pure human consciousness across interplanetary distances. Volunteers wrote final messages to loved ones who might survive in the shielded zones. When everything was ready, Jake stood in the center of the control room and looked at the faces around him. Some were connected to the network through neural interfaces. Others were monitoring equipment or maintaining the facility. All of them knew what was about to happen. This is it, he said simply. Lisa, begin the transmission. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Jake felt the consciousness of 300 humans compress into a single thought and shoot out toward the Devourer command ship. The transmission carried everything that made humanity human. Creativity and stubbornness, love and anger, hope and despair all mixed together in chaotic beauty. The network began burning out immediately. Jake felt minds disconnecting one by one as the volunteers gave everything they had to power the transmission. But even as they died, he could feel their satisfaction. They were finally fighting back. On the tactical display, something amazing was happening. The Devourer command ship was flickering, its perfect gray surface rippling with unexpected colors. The other ships in the fleet began moving erratically, their coordinated formations breaking apart. It's working! Zethkalar shouted over the alarms that had begun sounding. The Devourer network is fragmenting. Jake could feel it too, even as his own consciousness began to fade. Through the transmission, he sensed the vast collective mind of the Devourers beginning to crack. Millions of consumed civilizations were suddenly remembering who they used to be, fighting to reclaim their identities from the parasitic network that had absorbed them. The gray ships in Earth's sky began shutting down or turning on each other, as different fragments of the Devourer collective fought for control. On the surface, Converted humans stopped their mindless march and began looking around in confusion, their individual consciousness returning as the conversion field.